I took this with me. This is not okay. Okay, should start. Before we do the minor, just to say a few words about tonight. Tonight is Chav Dalet Teves. Dalet Teves is the Yom Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is Stalik on this day of Chav Dalet Teves. And just a little bit of something about Alter Rebbe and what happened at that time. Alter Rebbe was 68 years old. And what to the Alter Rebbe is Histalkus, about we see things happen on a very godly level. Because of course spiritually everything has a purpose and a time and a place. These are things beyond our comprehension. But the Gashmias, what is that led to the Alter Rebbe's Histalkus? Was at that time there was a war going on. And by the way, you have the booklet so you can look up a few details about the Alter Rebbe. There was a war going on between Russia and France. The two at the top were Napoleon and the Tsar. And the question is, we as Yidden, who should we pray for? What do we want? What would be better? So it's actually someone who lived in the time of the Alter Rebbe, who was also a big Rebbe. Being more liberal and more open, and as a result of that, more doors open for the Jewish people. Like this, they were persecuted and they were locked out of a lot of things, and he would open the doors. On the other hand, the Alter Rebbe was much against him winning the war. Alter Rebbe was afraid that the Tsar should win the war, and not only prayed, was very, very involved with any way possible that the Tsar should win the war. And the reason Alter Rebbe gave was because Napoleon wasn't only out to sort of undo, eventually there was a French Revolution, and they didn't want to have a king anymore, and we should have our own independence. It wasn't only independence at that level, it was independence at a much broader level. Independence from everything, anything, even independence from God. He didn't believe in God. He attributed everything to his own power. And he believed that people shouldn't have anyone on top of them, just be independent to do what he wants. The Alter Rebbe said, that if Napoleon would win the war, then his beliefs and his ideology would spread to the rest of the world, and Chas v'shalom, Yidden might have it better physically, monetarily they would have it better. Spiritually, they would assimilate. As a result of that, they would drop Torah and mitzvahs, and even now, the Rebbe in the Sikha, that even now, the basic principles of the modern world today with progressiveness and liberalism is based a lot on what Napoleon introduced. So had that been then, Chas v'shalom, this would have, God forbid, caused most Jews to distance themselves from Yiddishkeit. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe was very strongly against him. And we know that the Alter Rebbe not only did that, he also appointed a chassid of his own, Rebbe Chassidus, that he should become a spy to help the Russian army. How does a chassid become a spy? Because he knew both languages. He knew French and he knew Russian. And in a war, you need a lot of translations to know what's going on. So he was one of the people that they hired, they took him to do this job because he lived in a place which was by the border. He knew both languages. And he gave over information to the Russian army that he found out the French army. And the French army was totally unaware that he was doing this. So this is the famous story that's told that he said that the Alter Rebbe's teachings saved his life. He said one of the fundamentals of his teaching is that the mind controls the heart. So a few attacks from the army against the Russian army failed in the last minute. And they had no why, how the Russians were prepared for this attack. And obviously they knew that it's coming. That means there's a spy. And really no one knew about it except for the top generals. So they were suspecting that somebody all the way on top can't be trusted as leaking information. They didn't know who it was. They didn't realize it was actually this chassid. And there's actually a story, the details of what the attack was and how he told them about the attack and they prevented it. So one day he was sitting in the room, the general was on one end of the room, he was in another end of the room, and he's doing translation, and they're planning, and the door opens up, and Napoleon himself walks in, which wasn't usual. He walks in, looks around, and he sees this Jew there. His first words that came out of his mouth was, first he said, "What are you doing here?" And then he said to him, "You're the spy." He saw a stranger, a foreigner, that must be a spy. And as soon as he said those words, he put his hand on his heart to see how fast his heart would be racing. And the chassid said, I mean, if you'd be totally innocent, your heart would be racing. But I guess he wanted to say that if you're guilty, it'll be racing much more. The chassid said, because Alter Rebbe taught us and trained us that the mind controls the heart, not only was my heart not racing, it was just very calm as if nothing happened. And when he saw that, he just dismissed him and went on, because obviously this man has no clue, because again, even if you're innocent, your heart should be racing. So it saved his life. And Napoleon, there was a point where Napoleon did come into Russia, and he went to the Alter Rebbe's city, and the Alter Rebbe said that he was such a klippa. In other words, he is not just a warrior, general, a dictator, whatever he was, but he was actually, in him, there was a very big force of klippa. He was the klippa of that generation. That's how the Rebbe looked at him, Alter Rebbe. And he said he didn't want to be under his sort of jurisdiction not in a moment. So Rebbe left his town, and because he was helping the Russian army with information, they had soldiers escorting the Alter Rebbe. I think it says about 100 families went along with him, not 100 people maybe. The families of the Alter Rebbe and other people went along with him, and they escaped. They ran away from the town. After traveling a few miles, Alter Rebbe said, "I must go back." And they asked him to go back with everybody. No, just he alone will go back. And they sent a few soldiers back. Came back. What did he do? He told the chassid that came with him, "Go inside and find any object you can find. Bring it to me. Bring it back." All he found was a pair of old slippers. And then Alter Rebbe asked them to light a match and put the house on fire, which they did. And then he left. And after he left town from one end, Napoleon came in from the other end. The first place he asked to go to was the house of, it was called Rabbi Baruch. In those days, the last name was your father's name. His father's name was Baruch. So he was looking for that house and came to the house and he saw it's on fire. He tried everything to put the fire out, but it was too big of a fire. Then he said, I'll give a large sum of money to anyone in town that can bring me something that they got from the Alter Rebbe. Obviously, no one came forth. But the Alter Rebbe explained that he was a klipper and he worked with sorcery. Besides the fact that he was a general, he was a sorcerer. And he wanted to use the power of sorcery to chas v'sholem touch the Alter Rebbe. Had he had in his hand an article that belonged to the Alter Rebbe, he'd be able to, God forbid, do some damage. That's what the Alter Rebbe got everything. And that's what the Alter Rebbe didn't want to be under his jurisdiction. As a result of that, the Alter Rebbe was traveling. And by the way, even his travels, Napoleon came looking for him. He had soldiers to try to find him, to pursue him. And the Alter Rebbe ran from one place to another place to another place. And then came the cold, this happened in the summer, cold Russian winters. And the cold Russian winters were very difficult. And at a certain point, Alter Rebbe got sick. And a few days later, he passed away. And Alter Rebbe is buried in a place called Hadich, but he didn't pass away. He said he passed away in a small village called Piana, which is near Hadich. And because it was a small city, there's no place to bury, so they took him to Hadich. So there's a story about that as well, which shows us the greatness of the Alter Rebbe. This story happened about 10 years after the Alter Rebbe's illness. Then there were two Jewish businessmen that they grew up with Torah mitzvahs, but because they were businessmen, they traveled a lot. They slowly, it's very difficult when you travel to keep up with kashrus, with the minyan, with davening, with this and with that. So they slowly sort of dropped one thing, dropped another thing, until they became totally not from. And that way, they came to this inn. And the owner of the inn sees two Jewish people. So he says, you want only kosher food or you want any kind of food? So he said, it doesn't matter. And then instead of bringing food to them, he comes back with two other people, big husky guys, and they have in their hands an axe, knives, and other things. And they tell him, you're not in an inn, you're headquarters. And we're going to kill you and give us all the money that you have. And of course, they realized they fell into a trap. They began to beg and plead. They said, nothing's going to help. He said, I'll give you all the money. We're businessmen. We have money, but let us live. He said, no, we'll let you live. Then you're going to call the police. Anyway, nothing helped. They just had a little bit of time before they could say their prayers. They said, okay. They put them into a room. They locked the room. And they said, go into this room and do the last prayers, which they were there. And of course, they began to think that this is all their fault because they started to stop davening, they stopped learning, they stopped keeping Shabbos, stopped keeping kashrus. It's definitely coming from Hashem. And they did really good tshuva. They were crying a lot. After an hour or two, they hear footsteps, the guy's coming back, opens the door. Instead of the axe and the knives and the chains and whatever it is that they had a tray of food, smile on his face, and they're like totally confused and shocked. Said, first eat something, then I'll explain you. We're not here to kill you. That was just for a different reason. Anyway, they told him like this: 10 years ago, there was a very holy man that died in this house, and he was in this room where you are now. And this holy man, he passed away. The owners were not Jewish, apparently. He made a request. And he said, like this, if ever two people come and you ask them whether they want good kosher food or non-kosher food, and they tell you it doesn't matter, try to do whatever you can to make them do tshuva.
They succeeded.
And I heard another part of the story that he said to them, and how are you going to remember what I'm telling you now? What's going to be your sign? You'll see when you open the door, it's going to really squeak loud. And that's going to be something to remind you. And that's what happened. When they walked in, the door squeaked very loud. And he reminded himself the story of the Alter Rebbe. And then when he asked them, and he said to them, I don't even use this room. This room is locked. Sometimes Jews come here, and I say, if you want to pray, I let you go into this room to pray. But I don't use the room. It's a holy room. But I put you in this room because of this reason. And what does it mean, basically? The Alter Rebbe saw 10 years earlier that in this spot where he is, these two Jews are going to wander, and they're going to need something to make them do tshuva. And the Alter Rebbe already then did something to prevent them from continuing their life in the wrong way. That's the story of the Alter Rebbe, and it's connected to Chavdal Teves. Chavdal Teves itself was Shabbos that year. Shabbos was over, and the Alter Rebbe had Havdalah. The Alter Rebbe was obviously very sick, and the Tzemach Tzedek writes in a letter that he noticed that the Tzemach Tzedek was having Meir was very broken, naturally, very broken, and he said to the Tzemach Tzedek that that's not the way you're supposed to be. The person's supposed to be besimcha. He quoted something that it says in the Zohar, and the Tzemach Tzedek always quoted this. And the Zohar says that Hashem reflects us, just like water reflects a face, which means that if I have a face, I'm smiling, I'll see a smiling face in the water. If I have a face that's sad, I'll see a sad face in the water. Spiritually, it means that if I am besimcha, and I'm thinking positive, that good things will come, then that's what happens up there. That this inyan, which is good, that I'm waiting for, that bracha becomes in the spiritual realm, and then from there it evolves down here. If on the other hand, the person is picturing chas v'shalom, the negative, this will go wrong, and that'll go wrong, and God forbid, creating that condition up there, and then from there it could come down here. So this is where the Tzemach Tzedek came from. He said the famous quote. Tanya is the other room. No problem. So the Tzemach Tzedek, he was the one who said the famous quote, Trach gut, zayin gut. If you think positive, it'll be positive. Based on this story with the Alter Rebbe. Okay, we'll start learning them now. So what are you supposed to do in Chavdal Teves? First of all, it's a holy day. It's a day that's filled with bracha. When the Alter Rebbe himself explains in Tanya, there's two chapters in Tanya where the Alter Rebbe talks about Yartzeit. One is chapter 27, one is chapter 28, in the 4th volume of Tanya. And the Rebbe explains that it's actually a day that's filled with a lot of bracha, and on that day, learning something from the Alter Rebbe, telling a story of the Alter Rebbe, giving tzedakah, and any Torah mitzvahs makes you a vessel to be able to connect and receive the brachas in that day. Okay, let's get back to the Maimer. So the Maimer is in the middle of explaining, first of all, how do we connect the Etzem and Neshama? The Alter Rebbe says this is accomplished mainly through davening. And the connection can take place two ways, just like we find with the ladder of Yaakov. There were angels going up, and there were angels coming down, which means the connection could be Momayla Lamata, that the Neshama up there sends its signals to the Neshama down here, and it flows from up there to down here. And then we become excited and inspired. Or the other way around is that we do something to inspire ourselves consciously, and by doing that, we can connect to the essence of the neshama, and then the connection is complete. So he goes into how this happens during davening, and that's what the ladder of davening is all about. But he asks the question, why does it say the ladder is standing on the earth? And in fact, it says, you should leave this land and go to that land. The Torah emphasized Eretz. What's the meaning of Eretz? To explain what Eretz is and why Eretz Yisrael is called Eretz HaChaim, he goes into these details. And Adam Rishon it says that in the Chumash that the Eretz produced a living soul. One opinion is it's Adam Rishon, one opinion it's Mashiach. But what is the connection to Eretz? Up until here, what we learned was about who it is. But what is Eretz? So let's start from page 4, as we were holding, which is Beis in the Maimer Lech Lecha, Tovshin Beis. And he explained that the neshama of Adam Arishan and the neshama of Mashiach is the difference is Adam Arishan's neshama was chaya of the whole, all the Yidden, and Mashiach's neshama is the Yechid of all the Yidden, chaya and Yechid. And the difference is chaya is related to the sphere of Chokhmah, and Yechida is related to the sphere of Keser. So anytime you have a doubt, you can just turn to that chart we have here in the booklet. Where's that chart? Page something or other. Should be in here. It's page 46A. Okay. It just shows how the correspondence between the 5 levels of the soul, correspondence to the levels of the spirits, and that corresponds to different tzaddikim. Nefesh is Malchus, and that's David HaMelech. Ruach is Zoh, that's Eliyahu Navi. Neshama is Bina, that's Moshe Rabbeinu. Chaya is Chochmah, that's Adam Rishon, and Yechid is Keser, Melech HaMashiach. Okay, so now we're going to explain what's the connection to Aretz. So which line are we at? We are on the line that begins with the word Bechinas Keser. It's actually underlined. Bechinas Keser. Ha'aretz mekabel is Bechinas Chochmah. Aretz, which is Eretz Yisrael, the land, it gets its spiritual nourishment from Chochmah. V'lochein tzricha nishmas Adam Arishan shenimshcha mebechinas Chochmah l'moshech aldei ha'aretz. That's why it says in the pasuk that the land produced the neshama of Adam Arishan, because Chochmah and Aretz are connected to each other. Adam Arishan, his soul is connected to Chokhmah, which is Chaya. His soul comes from Aretz. And that's why it says, Toitzi ha'eretz nefesh Chaya. And it explains, even though we say the neshama comes from Chokhmah, it says in Tanya, right in chapter 2, that every one of our souls comes from Hashem's wisdom, from Hashem's chokhmah, right? But it comes from Hashem's chokhmah, but how does it come to us? It has to be channeled, and it has to be passed through chokhmah, Aretz, Malchus. So Malchus is Aretz. Just like physically, Aretz is the lowest place in the world. It's on the bottom. Everything is on top of the Aretz. Malchus is the 10th sphere. So Chokhmah has to go through, has to be channeled and processed through Malchus. And the truth is all neshamas, their roots are from Chokhmah, but in order to come down here, it has to go through Malchus. So, one of the reasons why Yidden are called B'nai Malachim, children of kings, Yidden are called, every Yid is a prince, says in the Chumash, Atam Tiyoli Mamlechas Kayanim V'Gei Kodesh, to use the term of royalty. The reason is because we come from the sphere of Malchus. But doesn't it say that we come from the sphere of Chokhmah, which is higher than Malchus? So the answer is the origin is Chokhmah. But it has to pass through Malchus, and from Malchus, it comes in, the neshama comes to us. Being that the route that the neshama takes to come down to this world, it starts off in Chokhmah, and it has to pass through Malchus, and then from Malchus it comes to us. So therefore, the reverse is also true, that when the neshama down here wants to reconnect to its source, which is Chachma, it's going from down up. Gamkin Adei Oretz Dafka has to pass through Oretz, has to pass through Malchus. In other words, if I want my neshama to reconnect to my source, which is Chachma, so my neshama has to connect to Malchus first, and through Malchus it can connect to Chachma. Yeah.
When the neshama leaves the body, it goes the same way back, like through Malchus, and then
right. But again, here's not talking about the neshama leaving the body. Here's talking about when a person's alive and the neshama wants to connect to Chachma, that kind of connection. But probably when the neshama leaves the body, also goes through all these different levels. Because it says in the Zohar, these words, Kida hitara le'ala. This is the door, this is the gateway to go up. Shadei ha'aretz, which means Eretz Yisrael specifically, kol hamshachis, v'chein kol ha'alois v'mata l'mayla. Everything spiritually that comes down to this world goes through Eretz Yisrael. Everything spiritually that goes up to this world goes to Eretz Yisrael. So in fact, this is another deeper meaning to the prophecy that Yaakov Avinu saw. So let me just preface this by saying, one of the things that it talks about a lot in Tanya is that love and fear of Hashem are considered wings. Anyone learn about that? Why it's wings? What's the kesher to wings?
because it's like you.
Yes and no. There's a little bit more explanation.
No. Fine.
Lama Avat Hashem v'yirat Hashem. Why is love Hashem and fear of Hashem considered two wings? One is love and one is fear.
Because you cannot go without, you cannot use only one, you have to have both.
Right. So you're saying is that you should go up. There's something a little bit more specific in Tanya. It's actually from Zohar, but the Rebbe talks about it. What? Right. That I understand, but who has to fly up?
Okay, but you're the prayer.
Right. The Rebbe says the mitzvahs don't fly up unless they have the wings. She's sitting next to Leah. What do you expect? Yeah. Philadelphia. Okay.
The original source.
Chachma. But it just passes through Philadelphia. Okay. Yeah. The Rebbe says, based on the words of the Zohar, that just like a bird can't fly without wings, mitzvahs can fly, not only mitzvahs and Torah can't fly without wings. Where are they flying to? What does it mean to fly? So it means that we know that the inyan of a mitzvah, and the things it says that are wonderful things about doing mitzvahs, the main thing is Malashon Tzavsa v'chibur, connect to Hashem. Hashem is up there, I don't mean physically, but up there in a high spiritual level. And we're down here. Through the mitzvahs, we connect. So when we say that without mitzvahs, it doesn't fly up, it means that the real connection, not without mitzvahs, without Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, the real connection of me being connected to Hashem through mitzvahs is mainly through love of Hashem and fear of Hashem. So basically, if a person does a mitzvah, and another mitzvah, and another mitzvah, and another mitzvah, but doesn't do it with love and fear of Hashem, he has a lot of mitzvahs, but they're all sitting on the floor. They're not able to go up. And the ultimate goal is to go up. This is the famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, that he once visited a town where they weren't learning Chassidus, weren't familiar with Chassidus, but they were all great Torah scholars. So they brought the Baal Shem Tov to this shul, and he said, this shul, there I think it said 300 people that are brilliant Torah scholars. So Baal Shem Tov said, I can't walk in there, it's full of Torah. So they took it as a compliment, that there's so much Torah there that he's sort of intimidated to walk in such a place. Rosh Hashanah said, oh, you misunderstood me. There's so many people learning so much Torah, but the Torah is not going up. Because they're not learning it with Abbas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So the place is packed with Torah. Imagine you learn Torah. It doesn't go up. So the room becomes packed. I can't walk in. There's no space for me. So that's what it means when it says the Malachim are going up. Where are they going? Malachim are meaning all the mitzvahs that we do, they go up. And where were they going up from? The ladder. Where was the ladder? In Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim. So basically it means that when we daven and we learn and we do mitzvahs and it goes up, but in order to go up, it has to pass through Eretz Yisrael and pass through Yerushalayim. Or someplace it says Hebron, but it's definitely Eretz Yisrael, that it has to go to the land of Eretz Yisrael, and from there it could go up. So this ladder wasn't just the ladder that Yaakov saw in his dream. This ladder is connected to all of us. That when we daven and when we learn and when we do mitzvahs, we want it to be connected, to go up. And in fact, that's also the deeper meaning of Yartzeit. I want to explain this. We have a minute today. Tonight is the Yartzeit. Why is the Yartzeit such a special day? Why is there so much bracha on that day? So the way it's explained in Chassidus is, we just finished saying that when you learn Torah and do mitzvahs, it goes up. But it does say that it doesn't go up all the way. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday goes up to a certain extent. On Shabbos, then everything I did during the week goes up all the way.
Wow.
That's Shabbos. And then it says that when a person passes away, what happens then? The neshama is not limited by the body anymore. So then his Torah and his mitzvahs that he did his whole life goes up on a whole new level, like it was never able to go up before, because now it's unlimited. And if all that Torah that he learned, Alter Rebbe lived 68 years, all the Torah and all the mitzvahs and all the good deeds he did for 68 years goes up l'mayla, there's an atomic explosion up there of spiritual light, and then that light comes down. That's where the bracha comes from. So this going up is, and that's why we said before, when we daven, we have to face Yerushalayim, we face Eretz Yisrael rather, because our tefillahs go through there. And that's the earth. But then he's going to explain, okay, practically speaking, what does it mean? That's something spiritual. That's for the spheres, the angels, but what does it mean for us? So the next part of the Maimon is going to explain practically what is the meaning of arts. But again, let's say the last words. This is why it says Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha means Yischabros v'Halo and Neshama Mamata Lamayla. The neshama should connect to Hashem from down up. But how does it connect? Mainly Aydei ha'aretz, dafka through the aretz. V'hainu lefi sha'aretz shalamata, imuchoven is connected to aretz shalamayla. So Maila aretz is the sphere of Malchus. Down here, aretz is physically the land, but the land down here is connected to the sphere of Malchus up there. So when the twins go through this land, or then this ladder is standing on this land, in Abraham Avinu's case, he said, leave this land and go to that land, Eretz Yisrael. It's all about the land. This is the land that is a sort of prerequisite. It's necessary to be there in order to be able to go up. The way he's explaining it, first he explains it according to Chassidus and Kabbalah, that the neshama goes up through the sphere of Malchus, and then he's going to explain it on a practical level. What does it mean? What does it mean, me serving Hashem, that my davening has to come from the arts? What he's going to explain how this is related to bit, to humility. Arts represents humility. It's the lowest thing. Everybody steps on it. So it just symbolizes humility. Doesn't mean God's way you have to get down on the ground and let people step on you. But he's going to explain how that's important in the Avodah. Okay, so let's complete the questions here. Where is it? So let's do Ois Beis now. This is page 16. Number 19 is Momaylo Lamata. What does that mean?
Up and down.
Up and down and up, going down. And the second one, Mumatu Lamayla, means from down, going up. Number 21, Sulam dot Slusa. What does that mean? Sulam means, the Hebrew word Sulam, a ladder, and Slusa is davening. Sulam that Yaakov saw in the dream, that's davening, tefillah. Shviras HaKeilim, we know about already. What is Zayin Tachtonim and Gimel Rishonim? 23 and 24. Zayin Tachtonim literally means the 7 lower ones, the 3 higher ones. What are we talking about? Spirits. The 7 lower ones are the 7 emotional attributes, Chesed, Gvura, Teves, Netzach, Yisrael, Malchus, and the 3 higher ones are Chochmah, Bina, and Das. Okay, number 25, you know, of course, the 5 names that the Neshama has, Chai, Yechida, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. So I wrote Naran Chai, because very often you'll find it in an abbreviation, Rosh Tevot, Naran and Chai. Naran is Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and Ches Yud is Chai Yechida. What day was Alter Rebbe born? That's the Yartzeit. What day was he born? Chayel. When was the Baal Shem Tov born? When did the Baal Shem Tov start teaching Chassidus? When did he start learning Chassidus with his Rebbe, Achi Ashulaini? Very good. What's the day? Just wanted to make sure. Yeah. The recording. So there's a lot of discussion at Chassidus with everything happening on Chayel. One of the answers that are given is, until the Baal Shem Tov, the part of the Neshama that was revealed in the world was mainly Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. Once Chassidus began to be revealed, that brought a new dimension of the Neshama to rise to the surface, which is mainly Chai and Yechida. And that's what the Ches and the Yud stand for. Chaya and Yechida.
So, according to the story of the Torah, when the Baal Shem Tov went to Prague, so all of the Torah that was before like the Chassidut Rebbe was staying in the low level?
No, Chas v'shalom. Obviously, years before that, they didn't study Chassidus. It was because at that time they didn't need it. They had Avos Hashem, they had Yirat Hashem, but without Chassidus. How is that possible? It's another discussion. But in the times of the Baal Shem Tov, that's when, in those days, that's when things started to get so weak that people were learning and the Torah and mitzvah were not really going up. So again, api halacha, if you learn Torah, you learn Torah. If you do a mitzvah, you do a mitzvah. But the spiritual part of it was not being accomplished. And that is accomplished through Avat Hashem and Yirat Hashem. But how is it that before Chassidus, they didn't need it? That needs to be explained. We have a whole class on this Mitzvah coming up. Oh no, not at this level, that's level 1. So we'll spend some time on it. Ken.
אתה חושב שיש אנשים שפשוט יכולים טועים? כאילו נכון, יש הרבה פעמים, יש ניתנים, יש כאילו, אבל אם אתה חושב שכאילו עולם חייב ללמוד חסידות בשביל הנשמה שלהם, שכאילו יש אחד שכאילו יותר שקבל נגיד לגמרא.